We are reading about them, but we are continuing to leave uncorrected the selfishness and self-centeredness within our own natures. The only way we can really overcome this is to see a plan big enough to challenge us. We can see a plan in which it's no longer necessary for us to have an army, because the financing of an army is no longer the privilege of one country. The only way a financing system on the World Bank could finance an army is if it should finance every army on earth at the same time, or make army the primary investment. And if we had all our earth money in the form of weapons, and every one of our countries was producing these weapons for defense, who would we fight? We'd have to go out and find another planet to use it on, because our own structure has destroyed, if it is properly maintained, has destroyed all need for armament. We no longer are going to have two countries fighting each other, because both will have to be financed for the same bank. And that's going to be hard to consider. And it also will have a very large effect upon taxation of all kinds. The proper management of human affairs will give us a quiet world in which to live, a world in which most of the folks will be doing what they most desire to do and not be the victims and pawns in the hands of a vast political and economic mercenary system. We can have what we need, we can have it, and when we get sick we can call on it, because the whole complete system can come to the aid of one person, whereas now there's no such a possibility. So I think that the coming century is going to force some of this thinking upon our people. We're going to have to face the impossibility of the present situation. We cannot continue to exploit the natural resources. Traffic situation alone are becoming impossible. We are exhausting the basic resources that took nature millions of years to build up. We are on a little planet where we are completely isolated in space like shipwrecked mariners. We have nowhere to go but where we are, and any so-called discussion of where we might be going remains extremely vague. The fact of the matter is, we don't need to go anywhere. The power that brought this planet into existence set up a system in which this planet could survive indefinitely. It could go on for thousands and millions of years without wasting the resources which were built up. We're becoming more impressed with the importance of conservation because of population expansion. But population expansion also produces more assets for the World Bank. When it reaches 9 billion population, this will not shake the bank at all, but it will shake practically any private economic institution that man can build. We are not prepared or equipped to handle overpopulation. But overpopulation is no problem if the values of life are pooled constantly, so that there is never a monopoly and never a need for a war or a revolution in order to get a square meal. So we also can go a little bit into the philosophy of this problem and see how it fits definitely into the great dream of the ages, the dream of the golden age, which we gradually changed into an age of gold and have regretted it ever since. We can look forward to perhaps a new heaven and a new earth right here. We can look forward to a world in which we are not afraid of each other. We are looking forward to a world in which crime simply doesn't pay at all, doesn't even produce any satisfaction. We're here where all forms of vice that actually become what they were, destroyers of the peace, destroyers of happiness, and destroyers of the individual, but not of the collective. Any abuse of our world position will come back upon our heads. Now, somewhere in the world here also we have the law of cause and effect, the laws of compensation. We have the probability that to have a secure future we must earn it. We are not going to have it handed to us. If we wish to be better off than we are, we must be better than we are. All of this problem we're going through is a kind of testing to see what the human being will do in various situations. And most folks have flunked the test so far. They have continued to hope for the best and done nothing. They have done all they could in little things, but nothing to correct the major problems we face. And for now and for a long time to come, finance will be the big temptation, the big problem, and the cause of the big emergency. Unless we can solve that, none of the other things we try to do will accomplish much that is of permanent value. We have to solve this problem. We have to find out how we can keep 6 million people on this earth without any of them being hungry. We cannot take the viewpoint of certain militarists that we'd be better off if a few 100 million starve to death or get murdered off. This is not nature's answer to anything. It is not human answer. But in desperation, we destroy ourselves and each other. The answer is a puzzle, maybe, a game, a challenge, something about which the greatest scientists we know might have something to think about. Here we have a problem that's suitable to challenge our greatest thinkers, our greatest scientists, mathematicians, economists, everything you could think of. The challenge of making humanity a practical form of existence in the world we live in. We have all the resources that we haven't already wasted, but they are getting somewhat thinner. We know that we are continually building for further difficulties. We know that we are polluting the atmosphere, polluting the earth, and polluting the water. That we are doing everything possible to destroy ourselves. And here we sit back with great problem, great delight, and so forth, to try and find out whether we can make a medical transplant of one human head onto another body. What we really need to do is to do something with the heads that are on the bodies now and get them into condition to be something in a living world of problems. It is no longer necessary to calculate what is going to happen in space, because we may not last long enough for it to happen anyway if we do not change our ways now. And when I say now, I mean within the full measure of this coming century. It will take probably most of that time to do it. More in his Utopia, which was one of the most ancient and interesting of the utopian dreams. More's Utopia was a sizable country, approximately the size of France. It was also populated by a group of people who were very intelligent, very helpful, useful, and good-natured. The entire country, the More's Utopia, had no medium of exchange. There was no monetary system in Utopia. But if a utopian wished to go out into the sad, cold world of high finance, the country issued him money to take care of his trip, and said they never expected to see it again. Also, for value, they used only primarily the word of the man or woman. A person's word was absolute. If he said he would do it, he did it. No bonds, no mortgages, nothing. He would do what he said he would do in exactly the way he promised to do it. And as for gold, which has become so important to us, he thought it would be, in Utopia, it made a very attractive cover for plumbing. Nobody wanted gold. No one thought that gold was any more secure than anything else. Well, today we have a system in which gold is the most secure thing we have. But there is something more secure than gold, and that is human integrity. Until we have that, we can't even take care of the gold. But while we're telling how strong and superior and wonderful it is, the thieves have broken in and stolen half of it. We cannot do with anything without improving the basic values of life through a proper cooperation of effort on levels of high finance, high economics, high computerization, and all the things we're working with at the present time. We have computers, but without morality they will add simply more to our load of sorrow. We had the motion picture, which was going to do great things. We're still waiting for the great things, but most that we're getting is ads, which are becoming more numerous all the time. We looked to all things. Higher education was going to do it. The great telescope was going to reveal all. And here we are, troubled to the very extent that many, many people see no hope for the future. We have no actual consecration. Education must be turned to use. No person is educated who does not know that cooperation is more important than competition. No one is educated who does not put the common good above his own personal desires. And there is no one educated who is not ready to stand up and defend integrity wherever it exists. These things we are not doing anything about. Our schools won't permit the discussion of morality even. Our various lines of business consider all integrities a debit and a source of financial loss. But what they don't tell us is that finance is losing itself. The whole financial theory is proving its own lack of value. We are constantly trying to trade ourselves in and out of some other country. We're trying to build up gross profit. We're trying to get some other country to take something we don't want while we take something they do want. This is all the same. Every day the same news. Another big cartel is being sued by the government. There is no end to this. And here we are, presumably, the most progressive, the most enlightened, the most fortunate group of human beings that ever inhabited the earth. We have come through many, many beginnings in order to reach this high degree of what? A kind of economic cannibalism. A constant process of devouring each other's hopes, beliefs, dreams, and ideals. So we have to do something to get into that 21st century. And one of the things we have to do is get in there in a group. We've got to go in as a civilization dedicated to progress and not to profit. Or rather, perhaps realizing that progress is the only profit that is real. We can do this a little bit, at least, by gradually becoming accustomed to the idea of sharing rather than grabbing. We can also gain some consolation out of watching other people have a good time and not being jealous of them all the while. Today, anyone who is happy is a victim of jealousy, regarded as either a thief in disguise or a dim-witted person. We cannot even accept the idea that anyone can find happiness or growth. Yet by degrees we are developing a new kind of people. They're showing up here and they're showing up there, but they are people who are beginning to realize where the trouble really is. That now is the time when we must get ready for a major change. That we cannot go on much longer making identically the same mistakes as our ancestors. We are no better off morally and ethically than the Phoenicians were 3,000 or 4,000 years ago. They took good care of their friends, hated their enemies, and killed strangers, and we do the same thing. We do not have any understanding of what 3,000 or 4,000 years of civilization has done. Now we have a few, in that course of time, we had a few civilized people. We had a few people who saw the truth and realized what it meant. So, we did one of two things. We either exterminated them or forgot them. They were right, but we weren't ready to be told that they were right, or we were not ready to accept what is right. So we disposed of them as the simple solution. We're trying it now. The moment anyone raises a voice that is different from the particular pressures of the moment, we do all that we can to silence them. But today they're not all remaining silent. there is coming all around the world a recognition of the absolute need of putting a new morality into function, a morality based upon the service of each other, of kindly, friendly, and cooperative dealings. We are gradually realizing that friendship is better than animosity and cooperation better than competition. As these processes increase, groups will arise, standing for these principles. As they get stronger, they will have a greater say. At the same time, those who are functioning from the wrong foundation are having more and more trouble. Each day we discover some more vice in someone we thought was a great hero. Each day we find that leaders are less able to lead, and that people who might be good leaders are less willing to run for office because it is nothing short of ethical suicide. So we hear now 2 world wars, 1 Great Depression, a great epidemic, a new epidemic not so big but building up, a series of vital seismic disasters. We've had the 20th century full of troubles. We have had a century of great expansion, which we will hear about as long as people can talk about it. We are told that we never had it so good. There's a little problem in the little comic book that has come out called Murphy's Law. And one of the statements in Murphy's Law is that the optimist says this is the best time we will ever know, and the pessimist says he's probably right. This is more or less our difficulty. We are unwilling to face this fact of growth. We are not mature human beings, the prime example of the creative process. We are not masters of all we survey. We may survey it, but it is taken away from us by taxes and mortgages. We are not really mature. We cannot keep a home together anymore. Everything we try to do, it falls apart. And if you examine it carefully enough, there's a little bit of money involved in almost every disaster. So to get the thing started right, we've got to correct that. And the only way that we can correct the money problem is to take it out of the keeping of professional economists and placing it in a neutral position, where something like the United Nations, but on a little less potentious footing, we all contribute to one solid banking system by persons who are not in any public office, nor representing anyone in public office. They should be trained for this position in school, college, and university. It should be the process of measuring and understanding the relationship between the human need and the human resource. And when they do this, they're going to find that the need is sufficient and the resource is sufficient. That we have no real problem unless the pattern is mismanaged. There is no reason why everyone should not have enough to eat unless a few people were too selfish. There is no reason why nations should go to each other's throats because of the financial advantage to politicians. All of this problem rests upon the fact that there is only one answer to our problem, and that is we must find a way of creating an honest dollar. The first paper money in China was done during the Ming dynasties. It was a piece of paper, a felt-like paper, about the size of an 8.5, 11 typewriter sheet. On the front was a string of cash, little coins with strung on strings, the small change of China, and the number of cash indicated in the picture were represented by one denomination on the bill. The note carried the seal of the emperor, and on the reverse there was a cute little inscription to the effect that anyone forging or counterfeiting this particular note would be shortened by the length of one head. These notes have been found in the tombs of the Chinese nobles when they died, so that they could be of use to them in the afterworld. Now, if we had a currency that we could take with us this might possibly give us a special inducement to try to save something. But when these Chinese gentry died and went to the other world, their cash stayed here and was excavated, and a piece of paper, the big note, which was originally worth maybe 50 cents, is now worth several $100s as a collector's item. In other words, it sort of made something on the interest rate. But there is no way of taking that money with them. And the whole theory is totally physical, materialistic. Now, if we could prove that anybody, no matter how rich they are, got out of this world very differently from anybody else, or took with him anything except his own conscience, we might have more incentive to making these constant mistakes. We are now finding fewer families are even willing to leave their funds to their own children, because it is obvious that these children are worthless. This is becoming a great problem. They are only, the individual who leaves $100 million to his children will probably create only 4 or 5 more narcotics addicts, because they'll have plenty of money to buy drugs with. It doesn't work at all. The only thing that can work is integrity. It has to start by being true, by being right. And the only way is have handling money is so arrange it that thieves cannot get hold of it, or cannot exploit it, or cannot loan it to each other for 20% interest. All of this high finance is the result of money being under the control of government, or as a phase of the national governing factor. The government has the right to demonetize or increase the management of money. It creates a secretary for that purpose. But the money is controlled by the political processes of the government. Another government alongside has a different political structure, so their money is controlled in a different way. Actually, the only answer is this system, which is a sort of a grand exaggeration of credit cards, but with a certain amount of control, and in which the individual has one bank, all individuals. This bank has branches wherever you need them. All the banks we have now could well function as branches. But the funds are all in control of a non-political body that is created out of the population of nations for the purpose of administering honestly and neutrally the financial resources of the planet. If such a person misplaces his confidence or misuses his licenses and privileges, he should be the most seriously punished of all malefactors. For an individual who damages the reputation or tries to cheat the World Bank is actually guilty of a crime against 6 billion separate persons, all of whom are the victims of his desire to be dishonest. If we can get something working in this way that has principles working for it, we will have a different picture by the time the century starts. And we will probably have opportunity, as days go on, to see more and more proof of why this is necessary. We are now trying to find what to do with our sewerage. We are trying to find how to get something to take the place of our petroleum. We are out for everything to balance the debits and credits of national trade balances. All these things are fussing. They are little things that should never exist. We should never have to go through all this process in order to survive. We should never go through all these compromises in order to succeed. They represent a tremendous straw figure that has been built up through the ages and has been rather considered a god of wealth, a god of evil, that wealth has become a thing of ill. It is not because of it being an asset that it is evil. It is because it is not honestly and properly administered. If we do have a process by which computerization can prove what happens to money, can prove who gets it and how it gets back. And we can prove that 100 years from now that maybe 50 billion accounts have been made upon this resource. People have borrowed it for everything you can think of. They have borrowed it for mortgages, they've borrowed it to educate their children, they've borrowed it for a weekend vacation, they've borrowed it for clothes or for food or for cars, anything you want. They may have even borrowed it to take it over to Reno and lose it. But it'll all be down. Yet at the end of this great length of time, the flow is such that the World Bank will be exactly the same in size and have just as much on hand as in the beginning. There will be no loss because of the stupidity of any individual. Because no matter what he does with the money, it will go back into that bank. If he loses it at Las Vegas or Reno, it will still go back to that bank. Whatever he buys with it, he has to pay for. And the person he pays will in turn have to deposit it or spend it again. And slowly it will work back to the World Bank. This would be a complete conservation and would leave at the end no world debt. The way we're going now, if there wasn't some control on it, in the next 100 years we'd owe so much we couldn't even dream of paying the interest on it. But if you have a world currency, a world structure, by means of which there is no longer any malefficiency, there is no malfeasance in the relationships of business, there is no subterfuge, no dictator goes off with 50 million. All these things cease because there's no need for them and no reason for them. There is no profit in them to the individual who is now dishonest. So one of our problems we have to face is to make honesty more profitable than dishonesty. And we can do it. We can not only make it more profitable, but infinitely more popular. And we will have a little time in between all these exchanges and interchanges to sit down and be friends with people. We will know each other better. We will not be afraid of each other. We won't spend half our time raising funds for some cause or other, or trying to get together a group of people to get rid of some councilman or something of that kind. All this type of thing is tied to money. It is tied to some way of making a little more out of a bad situation. We've just about reached the end. Just one more major upheaval, and we will be in very, very serious trouble. And we will always be in trouble as long as each nation creates its own currency. We will be in trouble just as they were in Germany and Hungary and Austria. After World War II, it cost as much as 25 billion pengos to mail a letter. The inflation was so bad that everyone was wiped out. And the people who were wiped out weren't the ones who were obviously responsible. But if there had been a different type of control in the first place, there'd have been no war. And if there had been a national emergency requiring a great expenditure of funds, it would be available, and in less than 10 years would be completely paid back without anyone owing a nickel. There is a way of doing it. And we don't know just when it will be used, but it will have to be used only probably when things get just so bad you can't do anything else. But when it gets that bad, don't worry. It may hurt a little, probably hurt all of us, but don't worry. The worse it gets, the sooner we'll cure it. And going on as we go now, we're not in a great hurry to cure anything. But we are trying to put a patch on it in order to continue our own ways. We're still looking for the high interest rates. We're still looking for mortgages. We're still raising the price of utilities. We're also high pricing goods every day. So we keep on until the cost and the income reach equal height and there's nothing left. Then we will begin to try to solve some kind of a problem. But there'll be a happy way of doing it. But we can start by putting maybe a little emphasis in our school systems on the fact that honesty is going to be necessary in the 21st century, and that the young people who are going to that new century without an ideal are going to just carry on the miseries of this one and continue to make the miseries worse. We can start with young people and try to give them a better foundation upon which to build. We can work with older people by trying to help them to understand the proper use of funds by which it would never be necessary for them to be dependent upon anyone. We can work all these things up to the proof that the working man will bring home his proper check, the child will have enough money for his education at all times without crippling the family. The wife wants to go out and take a job, she'll be paid, there'll be no loss, and there'll be no vast and heavy taxation to pay for all the things that we demand, because we will create them ourselves. We will use our own means, and because money does not get taxed or does not have to be split with political structures, we will not have near the taxation problem we have at the present time. Every individual can have a good life. And having a good life, there's something else to think about. Maybe, when that happens, we'll settle down to the labors of peace. Art, music, religion, philosophy, all the beauties of nature, the exploration of the beauties and joys of life. All these things will be much easier because we can begin to learn the very truth of it. Namely, that the lily of the field neither sows nor reaps, but the palace of Solomon is not as beautiful. So that out of studying nature we will find the great and beautiful things of life. We'll find the realities we have no time for. And we'll get over the idea that the world is corrupt or disloyal or unpleasant. We will be able to grow as human beings. And we can take this garden that we have inherited, which is full of weeds, and weed it. And we can make it a very beautiful garden in which we can live. We can live without fear. We can live without hating people because they have abused us. And we can live without the fear of war hanging over our heads all the time. The main problem is to get a solid financial system that cannot be easily exploited, and make it a world system, and even the littlest country has a right to proudly belong to it. And then all will go out for a nice trip. You'll take the same wallet with you wherever you go. And the goods you buy will be the same price in every nation. And that price will be fixed by values of a banking system based upon productivity of peoples. That as the productivity of peoples increases, the resources of this bank increases, and this increased resource takes care of population increase and makes more available everything that is necessary for the improvement of the planet. Here we can have the source of all the natural resources that we need. We can have whatever is important to take care of situations, and there will be no political involvements. There will be no problem of passing this regulation or trying to stop that one. If the problem is handled properly, each individual will have the means of his own protection and survival, and he will feel humiliated by nothing. He will not be depending upon the generosity of anyone. He will be merely one of the 6 billion human beings that are the primary asset of the human race. If we can think of it a little that way, I think we'll be very much better off in the days ahead. Thanks a lot.